vision for the Makers essentially came from my experiences at Caravan Farm Theatre and other arts and culture nonprofits in the Okanagan. I fell in love with their origin stories and rich histories. When my boys were young, I brought them to the Caravan Theatre in Armstrong. Our experiences formed some rich core memories as a family. When an opportunity came up to work there, I embraced it and spent 3 years as part of the team. Many things have changed on the farm, but the original wood buildings, wagons, and land still resonate deeply with the vibrant history of the theater company, the productions, and the tens of thousands of patrons who have visited the farm for more than 40 years. Working at CFT, I had the honor of sharing time with many of the original caravanners and hearing their stories. It opened my eyes to ways of living unfamiliar to me, simpler ways as creatives, rich in culture and authenticity, challenging ways that developed character and compassion, a collective vision of creating culture with theater as the medium to reach people and enrich lives. Please join us as we visit Nick Hutchinson at his lovely home. He was the original Caravan artistic director and the force behind creating the 80-acre property and professional theater company we all know and love as Caravan Farm Theatre. I'm Kerry McLeod. Welcome to The Makers.
Just in time for tea.
Oh, that's amazing. So good to see you.
Hi. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh,
Look
look,
what I
you brought
brought.
the book.
Of course I did.
Oh,
I love the book.
Great.
It's amazing.
That was perfectly poured.
Oh, thank you. Here we go. Hopefully
Cheers.
it's perfectly steeped. I'm glad this is finally coming together.
Cheers, Kerry.
Well, I was born in London, England, and to my mother, who was Peggy Ashcroft, Dame Peggy Ashcroft eventually, who was an amazing theatre actress who became a film star in her later life, and in the year she died got an Oscar.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing. And she was also a constant visitor to the Caravan, even acted with the Caravan when she came out in 1 year. And my father was a barrister, they call it in England, and an advocate, and he had many extraordinary cases, and when he was turning 100, he produced a book. And that had occupied him for a number of years. So when I was spending the last 2.5 years with him, looking after him before he died at 102 and a half, he kept saying, "You've got to write a book." And I did. So yeah, and so I was very lucky to have these amazing parents. And my grandmother being sort of a social center of the Bloomsburys, I mean, I was surrounded by all this amazing stuff from the past. And then as I sort of grew up and tended towards the theater, being fascinated by that, there was this amazing explosion of theater in England and all over the place in the early 60s, where it was just inspiring, and you couldn't escape that inspiration. I mean, whether it was in the theater or in music or in the movies or in art, it was walls were being broken down and things were changing, and then that led sort of ineluctably to the revolution of our time. Like, my struggle as a young person was to get away from my parents because they were so astoundingly successful, and get away from England because I discovered it was the most disgusting class society that had imperialized half the world and couldn't get rid of its sort of imperialistic sense. So I was kind of, yeah, and I was to a degree supported in my antipathies to all that. Very much so from my mum, which was, you know, the 68 in Paris, which was my experience because I trained in France. And ultimately, for various reasons, which you'd have to read the book to go into, I found myself in Montreal in the midst of the FLQ explosion of 1970, and ultimately figured out that probably I wasn't a Québécois. And, you know, like all good souls, went west, young man. Coming over the Rockies, I fell in love with the land because it's the most beautiful place I had ever seen. And it was the wilderness that was so compelling. So that led to all sorts of things, by which time I'd given up on the sort of the normal professional theater. I found it cramping and uninspiring and normalizing. And I'd given up entirely and got back to the land and got a horse. And then eventually, this amazing couple who had started the Little People's Caravan and needed a theater person with a bit of track record so they could get some funding, asked me to become the artistic director of the Caravan Stage Company. We were stationed at that time, at the end of every year, we would end up somewhere where winter quarters were found for the horses and people dispersed. And that year we were in Tappan, and we toured. It was a very long tour. We toured all the way to Nelson, over the Monashees, all the way to Grand Forks, all the way up to Kelowna, and then finished up in Fintry, right? Yeah. Because the mayor of Kelowna got very excited by our show, which had got quite good by the end of the tour. It took a long time for it to really get it right. And he secured us quarters in the Socred HQ, what used to be the HQ of the Socred Party, which wasn't exactly our scene. Okay. But we had these amazing winter quarters right on Okanagan Lake and everything. And that was where we actually started rehearsing, I think, the show that defined the Caravan Stage Company more than anything else, which was the story of Bill Miner, the train robber. Because our society was the Bill Miner Society for Cultural Advancement. And Bill Miner, if you didn't know your history, was this highwayman from the States who came up and got a little gang together, and they pulled off these 2 robberies of the CPR and got arrested at the end of it, right? But he escaped, as all good highwaymen did, and had a kind of Robin Hood reputation. because he had a persona called George Edwards, which was a gentleman who gave oranges to the kids and danced with all the young ladies and was, you know, had a great sort of gift. That was in near Princeton, in that Headley area where he was, and then moved into rediscovering his outlawness, which he'd done a lot of stagecoach robberies, and I think that this was the first train robbery that he pulled off. And it was the only time that the CPR was robbed. But as the song of, one of the songs in the Caravan show was somebody robbed the CPR, you can play it on your fiddle and your old guitar. Some people say it's a terrible crime, but as for me, I think it's just about time. And that got a great roar from the audience as the CPR traveled past the show and hooted its horn. You know, I mean, that actually is in the movie called Horse-Drawn Magic, which is a beautiful movie of the National Film Board, which is on YouTube now. It was like, it was a company. And what makes up a company? That's the thing. And I've always thought about, my mom was, you know, totally committed to the idea of, she called it the company. And that idea that you need a group of actors who understand each other and stick together and all those things, which is very rare in the theater profession, right? This doesn't happen. People are under contract and then they go back home and do all that. But if you're going to travel with 5 or 6 wagons with teams of horses and outriding horses and kids, and you need a farrier, someone to shoe the horses, and you need a cook, and you need what in Shakespeare's day was the mechanicals, were the people who built what was needed for the sets or the stage, and weren't necessarily actors, but were able to play their role in the performance, because it was vital that everybody was part of the performance as well. So you had, obviously you had people who, you tried to get people, who could suffer the slings and arrows of touring with horses through all the different vicissitudes that exist, and B, could actually deliver the main parts. That requires skills, right? And so you have to find those people, and you also have to find the people who enjoy performing, but maybe aren't completely up to that level, but are perfect for the lesser parts. Okay. So, you know, you find that, you try and find that, and the thing is, will people come back? And on average, in those early days of the Caravan, you probably had about 65 to 70% of the people came back. And then you had to replenish at some point, and it could be anywhere along the line. But the experience was the really key thing. You did need to have people who knew the ropes, because there are a lot of ropes. I mean, and they're not all to do with acting, they're to do with horsemanship, and they're to do with all those other things that go along with life on the road, which was an amazing experience. Who'd have thunk? I mean, like when I originally had my horse, and this became a bit of a conflict for me, because I had a horse, but I was actually really about doing theater, bottom line, even if I'd sort of given it up for a few years. But so that becomes a very contradictory issue. I had to figure out where the horse was, and blah, 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 for the winter, and you know, all those things. So this extraordinary event of the Caravan coalescing for me was humongous, right? It was providential, I think. Because I suppose that the crux of the transition from the Caravan Stage Company to the Caravan Farm Theatre, and then the Caravan Stage Company going on down into the States, and then eventually becoming the Barge Theatre. The originators, Paul and Hans Kerry, who had started the Caravan, figured that really on the experience of the farm was a money sucker, and was going to require more and more investment, which we didn't have, and that the Caravan was the thing that worked, and so we're not coming back. We're going down to the States, so we're not coming back. So we were faced, those that weren't in the company going down south, to what do we do? And inevitably it turned out we had to do theatre because we weren't really good enough to make a killing out of potatoes, right? Wasn't our strength. Although we were very committed, and we had this notion of art and potatoes, but the art was the thing that we could do. And so our first show in 1985 was our wonderful writer Peter Anderson, who wrote a version of Animal Farm, which was perfect for the farm, and was a stunning hit. We built seats. Well, it was mostly promenade theatre all through the farmyard, but we built seats for about 200 people. We thought we'd be doing all right if we had 200 people. We did 4 or 5 performances, or 6, I can't remember how many performances. By the end, we were playing to 700 people a night. And it was absolutely astonishing how the word spread, and the majority of people who came were people who had seen the Caravan at some point or other and were coming back to it. And so that started to create its own effect, right? And I mean, we didn't always have such a tremendous crowd or a tremendous show, because that was sort of a unique beginning energy, right? But it kept on going, and it worked, and then an audience built up from there that was more local and less far away, obviously, but kind of was contained within the circle of Kamloops and Kelowna. I had this idea of doing a flatbed theatre, right? Going to communities with a show, with a flatbed as your stage, and performing, because I figured that was what the theatre was for. I still think it is what the theatre is for, is to go out and play to people. And if you're good enough to play to people, then they'll come and see you where you are, which is sort of what happened when the Caravan Farm Theatre evolved out of our Caravan Stage Company experience, right? Was that we had an audience that were willing to come, right? And then we had to deliver something equivalent to the excitement that the Caravan afforded by going into the community. So it's, I think that's a huge lesson for what theatre could or should be. My thoughts are about tragedy and comedy, and that theatre is suffering from an absence of those things, and it's becoming personalized to a stultifying effect. Like, everybody's complaining about mental health, but the obvious lack of culture produces mental health issues. What is the theatre for? Comedy and tragedy. What is comedy and tragedy? They're extremes of life, which are about their explorations of those fringe things, and allow people to collectively experience them, to laugh and to cry collectively, together, to understand what, somebody's eyes getting put out on the stage, or a farce you know, expertly done, cracks everybody up. You know, it's skills of that nature. That's what theater is about. It's not wanted on the voyage. We don't want to explore madness. I'm sorry. We just want to medicate it. But looking at what came before, it's history again. It's always back to history, you know. And if it's theater, it go back to Shakespeare. Because there's no other writer there's no other work that informs as widely and as amazingly as he did in some extraordinary way, or whoever that was, because I don't think it was that bald guy from Stratford. You know, I think it was somebody else, but that's another question. But that's hard, isn't it? Because language is something that we're losing really fast. You know, that the letter, like when I wrote the book, I discovered all these letters that I'd written to my dad and my mom, and they had kept them in a, you know, with an elastic band. So it was my history. Like, for God's sake, I don't think emails will do. You know, they won't give you that detail. So that's language. So language is, you know, language and history, they do go together like cart and horse, right? And language has to be worked on, used, explored. So yeah, I think that's really important. Well, my advice is whatever it is that really impassions you and drives you, learn about it, learn where it came from, learn what it was, learn how it came to be and why it excites you, and take it from there, because you're not going to get it anywhere else. And the trouble is that that is something that is not, you know, it's not like you can go and see, like I could go and see a production by Peter Brook, which would inspire me beyond belief and instruct me on all sorts of levels, because it's very rare to ever find anything like that. But there are little shades of it. And if you look at what the musicians are doing. The musicians are the people who are touring the country. The musicians are going into the communities and playing the bars. I mean, they are the only cultural entity which impacts generally people. And that's amazing that they can do that. All these pictures are by Molly, and Molly and I got together, I think it was my third year at the Caravan, and we started building this in 1980 and lived there for a very long time, because Molly was really the designer who all directors need to have, because she's the most amazing artist, but also an understander of theater and drama and the whole principle of less is more. And she was a total partner for me in the time that I was at the Caravan Farm, really, you know, when.
And there's rarely a show now that her backdrops aren't part of.
The backdrop, absolutely.
They're timeless.
They are very timeless.
Did you design this house? I
designed the house. Well, I did, and then we did. I mean, yeah, I did basically. The idea was, I got obsessed with the idea of an octagon. And an octagon is two squares set in each other.
Okay.
And so I was fascinated by that. So, and then coming to build it, decided that it would be easier to build the upstairs, which is one of the squares, because it was just a square, and it got more complicated the further down you got.
I've actually taken photos and painted this door.
Oh, no kidding.
With the little moon inside, and the way you did the wood, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful door.
And are these some of the Caravan?
And these are her horses, actually. This was her, well, these two, Kate and Tess, And that's Kate and Tess. They were her plow horses because we got heavily into plowing when we...
Potatoes?
When the potato aspect of the farm, but we got into plowing and the plowing matches.
Oh.
And Molly got her team and she started to plow and she cleaned up on all us boys.
Really?
Because she could draw a better straight line than anybody else. And she became a champion plowwoman. The first champion plowwoman, I should add. If life has a million metaphors, plowing must surely be one. The straight and the narrow, the lay of your furrow, the slit before you are done. And if plowing was merely a metaphor for your life and the things that you do, from your start to your finish, your land will diminish. It ain't easy to keep it all true. And if growing is always a metaphor, then plowing is where it begins. It's a question of digging, of setting the rigging, and hearing the share when it sings. But it's also a question of going too deep, of losing your suction and taking a leap, of hitting a hard pan, a root or a rock that bounces you back and gives you a shock, of getting exhausted and losing your cool, of blaming your horses, the land, or your tool. Easy boy. Stay in the ditch, you son of... So if life has a million metaphors, for me plowing is darn near the top. And I hope when I'm done, I can look at a crown that meets in the middle and stop.
Yay! That's awesome.
There you go.
Spending time with Nick, reading his book, exploring the history of CFT, and all the artists who poured their hearts into making it what it is today, awakens inspiration and hope. Our world isn't an easy one to navigate, especially for younger generations. With the makers, I dream of inspiring young creatives to find ways to live an artistic life through hearing stories from older generations. They found ways of living unconventionally that led to fulfilling and purposeful lives. Nick shares many important lessons. The first one that resonated with me was get your feet in the dirt. Explore your passions, learn their history, and just dive in as much as possible. Then, community is more important than capitalistic consumerism. Toughing it out, living and being together, and deciding things collectively. And finally, a lack of culture produces mental health issues. In the tragedy and comedy of the theater, the extremes of life are explored and experienced collectively to open up conversations and growth. Numbing madness into normality isn't the answer. Exploring deep emotions actually heals. Thank you for joining us for this final episode of Season 1 of The Makers.